to today's presentation of the Data Differentiator. Thank you for joining myself, Chloe Schwartz-Apfel, Business Development at Portfolio BI, and our subject matter expert, Christopher Bloechle, Chief Technology Officer at Portfolio BI. Ahead of diving into today's session, we just wanted to review a few housekeeping items. Today's event should run approximately 30 minutes. We have allocated some time at the end of today's session for Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see three icons: chat, raise hand, and Q&A. Please submit your questions through Q&A as you think of them, and we will get to them at the end of today's session. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you after the webinar and make sure we answer it. If you have any technical difficulties during the event, please hit raise hand and a member of Portfolio BI will be in touch with you. If you miss anything, don't worry, we will be recording today's session and we'll make it available after the webinar. At Portfolio BI, we are data experts. We help firms see, share, and make informed decisions quickly. Today, we are going to cover how enterprise data management can be a competitive differentiator for your firm. Let's get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Bloechle, the CTO of Portfolio BI, where I oversee the development of our suite of products and the technical delivery for our hosted clients. I've been with Portfolio BI for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the management team at Point72, formerly SAC Capital, where I established the Enterprise Data Services team, developing solutions for the middle and back office operations, and later led the global team responsible for long-short discretionary technology. Now, my background is in development, and I'm still a developer, although it's become more of a nights and weekends hobby as PBI has grown.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm Chloe Schwartz-Apfel. For those of you who may not be familiar with Portfolio BI, we're a financial technology company that empowers the buy side by leveraging our multi-asset class, front-to-back, fully integrated solutions. Our clients are hedge funds, asset managers, OCIOs, fund allocators, fund administrators, and private equity firms. We're headquartered in New York City, where over 150 firms like yours trust Portfolio BI, which was born from the merger of Lux FTS and Northpoint Technologies. IT leaders are struggling with data sprawl. Today, we'll share some approaches about how to address these challenges. Chris, we know firms are struggling with managing their data as complexity arises. Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Sure. So my approach and thoughts on the importance of enterprise data management, or EDM, come from experiencing the data management headaches firsthand at Point72 as it grew both in business and technical complexity, multi-manager, multi-strategy, multi-prime, thousands of servers, hundreds of databases, and over 1,000 employees, as well as working with the clients at Portfolio BI, where it's a diverse set of various sizes and makeup. Now here, we've listed some of the potential causes of data headaches. Some of these may resonate, but it's certainly not an exhaustive list. I do feel it's important to identify not just maybe your current headaches, but consider some of the headaches that plague some others as they're considering their enterprise data management strategy. Now, first up are data silos, right? So data silos refer to data being trapped in systems. Now, they can be trapped in individual systems, maybe they're trapped in separate databases, or even in files such as Excel. As we're thinking about making the value out of the data, when it's trapped in these silos, it's difficult to pull them together. And another issue that we see quite often is around standardization, right? Do you always have to transform data to make it useful? Do you have common data definitions for your data sets? For example, if you have a country, right, the field called country, is that a country of issue? Is it a country ISO? Is it a country of incorporation or risk, right? We want to make sure that when we're referring to data in our system, we understand what those fields actually mean. Another one around standardization is sectors, right? So where are we getting our sector information from? Is it from S&P, right? Are we using GICS? Are we using BICS from Bloomberg? Maybe a sector classification from FactSet. Or do your internal teams decide that although those are standard classifications, they feel for their own needs, they need their own type of sector attribution. So, these are things that we see quite often. Now, when we talk about data quality, are we getting good data from our third parties? Do we have data coming in late? Is it complete? Do we have the right processes in place to value that data? Are we seeing that it's above or below some certain threshold, right? We want to make sure that we understand what those are. And then when we have these problems, who do we go to? Who owns our data sets? We want to make sure that we know who to turn to when we have issues around our data. When it comes to visualizations, again, when we have data silos or various systems, are you struggling just to put that data together, right? Are they graphs and charts, or are we looking at putting that data together in Excel, right? That can be a challenge. Now, maybe you're looking at all these things and saying, yes, these are all a challenge. I know they're a problem, but I don't know where to go. I recently spoke to a prospective client who had just that problem. He listed all these issues in trying to put together some strategy, but quite frankly, didn't know where to start. Maybe that's your headache.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to us a little bit about data sprawl.
Sure. As we referenced earlier, right, data sprawl is definitely a challenge. But let's first talk about what is enterprise data. So our enterprise data is the data that's coming into your enterprise or firm or originating within. This could be third-party data such as market data. It could be borrowing and lending rates, maybe valuation data from your admin. It could also be things originating internally, such as analyst ideas, your orders, trades, positions. From your risk team, it could be risk metrics, risk factors. On the HR side, it could be just your employee list. Maybe from compliance, it's your restricted list. So these are the things that we want to think about and consider when we're talking about our enterprise data. Now, to be competitive, we need to be aware of data sprawl. And we do know that this problem is growing because of the cloud. It's very easy to spin up a new S3 bucket in AWS or a storage account in Azure, a few clicks in the UI or a simple script, right? And we're also seeing the proliferation of SaaS products, right? Contributing to data being housed outside of our corporate network. You're seeing things on the corporate IT side like TriNet and Workday, sales and marketing products like Salesforce and Microsoft 365 Dynamics. Now, these are big systems, but I'm also hearing a lot of challenges with the free tier of SaaS products, right? An employee might decide to sign up for, some trial of a SaaS product because they don't need a credit card. This wasn't a problem just a few years ago. Now, if that product becomes something that's kind of imbued in their day-to-day process, now you have another system to consider and think about. So what we want to do is we want to get everybody in the habit of thinking about a data lifecycle. We want to make them think about, how are they acquiring the data? Is it coming from files or, via FTP or some API? We want to look at data processing, right? Our pre-processing. Do we have to make conversions to make it useful? Does the data come in every day? Is it just on trading days or maybe at month end? And then of course, storage. How and where are we going to store that data? In terms of analytics, right? This could encompass not just calculations, but maybe simple aggregations, or maybe the data set in itself is fully contained and we don't need to perform any analysis on top of that. Or maybe to get true value out of it, I need to join it to other data sets that exist in the environment. And then certainly last but not least is visualizations, right? And this is around consuming the data. How am I going to view it, in the graphs and charts, or again, just simple tabular data in Excel.
Great. So once firms get to this point, how should they go about setting their data goals?
Well, we've listed 4 areas that represent common drivers for an EDM strategy. First is portfolio performance reporting. And this is driven by the need to provide reports to the portfolio managers themselves. How are they doing? It could also be at the firm level for the executive management, where they need to see performance across the organization, across the firm and various funds. Now, these types of reports could include portfolio attribution, contribution, sector and country exposure, top winners and losers by P&L or maybe market cap. And it could also include performance, like relative to benchmarks. Whether we're a hedge fund, asset allocator, a private equity firm, family office, right? There's a need to provide some reports to the investors or owners. These reports are nuanced in that they need to consider contributions and redemptions. They also need to create reports targeted for marketing purposes, right? And take into consideration things like share classes. Now, compliance and regulatory is another common driver, right? These could be supporting regulatory filings, 13F, Form PF, Rule 105, FATCA, MiFID. There's an ever-growing list of regulations that we need to consider in our industry. We need to be mindful of the data that's required for those, and we may need to acquire more data, right, to support these filings. And last but not least, right, is self-service. And this is the one where I'm seeing just tremendous growth, right? The common complaint for business users is that IT takes too long. They just don't have appreciation of what might go into this, and they, quite frankly, don't want to wait. And I certainly can't blame them for that. Increasingly, companies are moving from centralized reporting teams and all to decentralizing and making it so that teams are more able to self-service. Now, I would argue that to be competitive, you have to nail the first three, but it's the fourth one, right? That if it's not on your radar, it definitely needs to be.
Yeah, we're seeing that a lot. So now that firms know what their data goals are, how do they begin defining the project?
Right, so to have a competitive edge, right, we need a measurement. We need to measure where we are now and assess our progress over time. So here we list a number of elements when auditing your current systems and processes. Now, I don't have the time to go through each of these, but I do want to touch on a few. First, with data governance, right, do we have a plan? Do we even know what that means? And, is that plan working? We'll talk a little bit about that more shortly. I'm a big fan of data flows. I love to start with the data flow diagrams, right? This is going to show me how data is flowing into a firm. It's going to show where the data goes once it's in the firm, right? How many systems and subsystems does it go to? What types of data there are? And as we're going through that process, we're going to start to develop data sets, common data sets that are going to go into our data dictionary. Our data dictionary will describe what those data sets are, and it'll have the attributes that make up those data sets. This helps with our information gathering process. Many firms don't have this in place, and I think it's something they really need to consider. In terms of data operations, so this is your core function around your data, right? These are the people that are going to be managing, entering data, overriding data, and potentially, reacquiring data, if there's some problem, like kicking off additional processes. I was involved in one environment where we were auditing the creation of a new account, right? And in that case, the users it was a central data management team. The users had an application that had a screen loaded with checkboxes, right? Different features and toggles to turn on and off. And as we were talking to them, about what these are, it was very clear that, quite frankly, they didn't know, So although the operations were kind of centralized, it was given to an operations analyst who didn't understand what it meant when he was making these changes to these flags and what the downstream impacts would be. And I think that's something you really want to make sure that you're careful of when you're building your operations. I also want to touch on the master data, right? So master and reference data is your bedrock, right? This is where you want to get this foundation. It has to be right. We want to identify what is our reference and master data. Some examples of this would be, your list of accounts, your counterparties, your brokers, your contacts at all of these companies, right? Your ISDAs, whether you have them or not, maybe your countries, geographic regions, currencies, exchanges, all of these things, right? And it'll also include your IDs and codes that'll help you map between your different data sets, long and short descriptions, naming, and all these things. Those are the ones that we want to make sure that we get right because they have great impact on your applications and your reports.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to us a little bit about data governance.
Sure. So data governance is going to impact the value of the data to the firm, right? We want to put in a governance to ensure usability of our data, availability, security, and quality, right? And this is where I'm going to tell you, you need a chief data officer. Now, whether it's a dedicated position or that responsibility is, a secondary or tertiary responsibility for somebody else, you definitely need to have somebody that you can go to help out and ensure that there is a process being followed that's measurable, right? Something that's measurable and brings value to the firm. Now, your data governance, there's multiple versions of this. 5-step processes, 10, 12, 13, if you go and look, you'll see all these various steps. Don't get caught up in the various steps themselves. But what you want to do is think about, tailoring your data governance to be proportional to, the size and complexity of your organization. First, we want to figure out how are we going to prioritize? What are we going to prioritize? We listed some examples before, right? You want to be very specific and you don't want to try to boil the ocean as we start. We want to make sure that we maximize information. So what we're talking about here is let people know what data already exists. This is where we want to consider our data dictionary and publishing that somewhere where people know what data exists within the firm. So they're not, either creating more data or, wasting time trying to figure out where to go. We're going to create some roles and responsibilities here, right? We're going to scope our mandate. We're going to figure out who our, kind of key members are. Here, it's important to figure out, who is going to be very supportive of these type of efforts and who may be a little resistant to change, right? You're going to have to approach those two cases a little bit differently. As we define these roles, we're going to think about our data operators. Is this all going to be centralized, like in the example I referenced before? Or are we going to make sure that we have data operators for each data set and empower them in that way? Are we considering our security and standards around how we're creating naming conventions and all? We want to have some accountability in this process, right? So we establish the owners, but we need to know at a data set level, right? What are the sources of record? What systems are sources of records? And, as I'm putting together reports and reporting processes, I want to know, where do I go if I'm dependent upon, let's say, a risk team, right, to perform some metrics, and I have to get a report out at the end of the day, can they guarantee or give me some SLA around making that data available to me? What happens if it's not there? Where do I go? Who do I talk to, maybe after hours, right? And as we're working through this, you're going to start to see a master data culture here, right? And as we try to introduce more data sets, we'll have a process in place to determine, do we really need them, right? And what are they supporting? Are we making material changes to our environment to support, efficiencies or supporting the current business, right? Around regulatory changes, perhaps, or, ensuring that we're staying within a current mandate. Or maybe we're making changes to support a new business, right? We're bringing in a new fund or getting involved with, an ESG category, right? But important in this process is some kind of feedback loop. Now, this could be as strong as metrics around your data quality, support tickets perhaps, but I feel it's really important just to get out there and talk to people. Have a forum of some kind where people can bring you in.
Thanks, Chris. As we wrap up today and head into our Q&A period, the intention for this webinar was to demonstrate what we like to refer to as the data differentiator, or data nirvana.
All right, so we have a quote here referencing Excel spreadsheets. This is something we hear quite often, right? A dependency on Excel, data trapped within Excel. Excel is a great tool, and I'm not going to be one to suggest that we get rid of it, but I think we want to make sure we use it correctly and don't abuse it, right? And as we're putting our data strategy together, right, and thinking about why we're doing this, one of the primary drivers is automation. If we have good data and good controls around that data, it allows us to get tremendous benefit from automation. I want to take you through, just a simple example of a reporting request and how having an EDM solution can help us, in solving this as the request kind of evolves over time. So let's start out with a simple example where, you have to produce an end of day, P&L and position report. A PM says, hey, I need an end of day report for my portfolio. Okay, so in order to produce this report, I'll need to know the PM, right? I'll need to know his portfolio, right? Portfolio code. Of course, I'll need to know the list of positions. So I take this data together, right? And I produce this report. Maybe it's online, maybe it's email, but we have multiple methods of providing this data. He turns around and says, hey, this is great, love it. Now, can you send this to my research analyst? But, my research analyst, I only want them to see the positions they cover. Okay, so now I have to figure out about coverage lists, right? Where do I go for that, right? If I don't have a governance in place of some kind or some forum to ask these questions, as a developer, I may just put in a new set of tables or a new, way of referencing our relationship between our coverage, our securities, and our research analysts. Maybe I'll take a look at, some of the ideas that they've done in the past and create it that way. Is that really the right thing to do? Or do I have a place where I can go to ask these questions? Now, I also need to understand the relationship, right, between my research analyst and my PM. Again, is that something that, as a developer, I'm just going to create, or am I going to escalate that? Is that something that HR should handle? And I need to also consider what happens if the team changes, right? If they hire somebody or somebody gets terminated, right? Maybe I need to create a distribution list, but maybe that's not really the best thing because, we don't want to have these proliferation of distribution lists as, are very common in larger companies. So now I'm feeling good about this. I have my research list, but, as I'm looking at the coverage, and I'm seeing that they're entering the coverage based on tickers. So they cover tickers, right? But the data I'm getting is positions. Now, if I don't have a great product like a SecMaster, right, to give me the mapping between IDs in my position keeping system and the tickers that are entered, right, I'm going to struggle with that. And, having a security master is a great example of being able to pull that data together. And I mentioned security master in particular because that's one of those kind of core EDM products that we see great use of here at Portfolio BI.
Thanks, Chris. And thank you to all of our attendees for joining us today. We've received a few questions from the audience and we have about 7 minutes, so let's get into them. Chris, the first question, how do I put all of my data sets together despite multiple solutions / platforms?
So this is a common challenge, right? So what we want to do here is, and I'm going to say it depends, but it does depend upon the amount of data that we're pulling together, right? Our solutions and our approach are going to differ on whether the data is something that can be easily imported, right, into a centralized system, or something where we're going to go out and grab that data and use it in more real-time scenarios. It's also the frequency of the data, right? Is the data changing very often? Or is it really just maybe end of day or month-end data where I don't have to worry so much about, changes intraday or, more frequently?
Another one. How do you fix your data once you determine that it is broken?
So fixing the data is around your data operations team, right? So lots of considerations need to come into play here. It's, do I fix it, and when I'm fixing that data, what's the impact downstream? Am I fixing it and then rerunning a report? Do I have to notify other teams or other systems? Do I have maybe, a messaging framework in place where, something is more sophisticated where I can make that change and I know that that change is now going to be broadcast to all my dependent processes? So it certainly depends upon, what type of data we're talking about and how we're consuming it.
Thanks, Chris. It can take forever to get a data set and/or report. How can you accelerate that timeline?
So I've long been a fan of customization and templates, right? So this is something that, you know, if you're a customer of Portfolio BI, you know is imbued in our DNA here, right? We love the ability to go in and quickly customize things through configuration, right? Having a common technology platform, right, allows us to use the same code base for our clients, and we're changing configuration on a client by client basis. Now, a lot of systems have configuration, and there's a chance of making it too complicated by over configuration, and that's where templating comes into play, and something that we employ at Portfolio BI in order to quickly get somebody up and running. If they see something, you know, let's say in our demo environment that they really it kind of resonates as something that they'd like to have in their system, we have the team and the processes in place to quickly get that up and running for somebody. So I would say it's configuration driven at the right level and templating.
And change management controls, right? To make sure only those that are given access can do so.
That's right. So our change management is going to want to consider keeping things in sync across the environments, you know, whether it's infrastructure or the actual configuration of itself. That's right.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our participants who joined us. We look forward to seeing you at our next virtual event, and we will follow up with you all shortly with the recording. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye now.